Hello, my name is Misha Fomytskyi. I'm one of the co-founders of Dynamics. In the previous video, we discussed PnL attribution with Greeks and also talked about the importance of PnL attribution in options trading. Today, we're going to extend this conversation and discuss PnL attribution with scenarios. We're also going to discuss some practical aspects of how to set up it in the infrastructure and how it can be used to improve your trading. PnL attribution with scenarios. Unlike PnL attribution with Greeks, in which we take infinitesimal derivatives with respect to input parameters, such as underlier price, or volatility, or rate, and then multiply those derivatives by the change in the corresponding factors. When we do PnL attribution with scenarios, we start at T1 and we change the parameter and do full revaluation with the new value of that parameter or that market data piece. For example, when we calculate spot PnL, we take the underlier price from second snapshot and we update the vol surface to the value of that underlier price, and we revalue our position. And the change in value we're going to call spot PnL. Obviously, the spot PnL is going to be equal to the delta PnL plus gamma PnL plus higher order terms that we're going to call spot unexplained PnL, the residual between spot PnL, delta, and gamma PnL. One subtlety here is that if we want to compare spot PnL to Black-Scholes, delta, and gamma, then we need to use sticky strike spot vol dynamics when we adjust volatility surface to the new value of the underlier. And if we use the correct spot vol dynamics, that is parameterized by SSR, skew stickiness ratio, and maybe some other parameters such as skew sensitivity and curvature sensitivity to the underlier, then this spot PnL is going to be compared to the delta PnL and gamma PnL that are calculated using the adjusted Greeks. Those adjusted Greeks, as I mentioned in the previous video, use the change in the by-strike volatility with underlier to adjust your delta or gamma. Another subtlety is that the spot price may need to be adjusted for the dividend value between T1 and T2 if there is a dividend in between. Now let's move on to other factors. Suppose we want to calculate rate PnL. The way we do this, we take the discount curve or any of the rate curves for which we want to calculate the corresponding PnL. So we take a rate curve at time T1, and we keep the forward starting rates from T1 to T2. But we're going to update the rates after the second snapshot to the forward starting rates from the second snapshot. Therefore, we're going to evaluate the option price with the new rate curve. And by doing so, we're going to not only capture the change in the fair value associated with the change in the term rate, but also with any of the term structure, which may affect things like early exercise or the discounting of the dividends before expiry. When we calculate time PnL, we need to calculate how volatility surface is going to change when we shift as-of time from T1 to T2. In Dynamics, there are several different ways of doing this, including sticky strike, sticky date adjustment that's going to be comparable to the theta PnL calculated in Black-Scholes world, where vols are sticky by strike and by expiry date. However, a more clever way of shifting volatility surface forward is going to preserve forward variances as you shift the volatility forward. And then there are several assumptions that you can make about the shape of the volatility surface that we can discuss some other time. How do you calculate vol PnL? Vol PnL would be directly comparable to the Vega PnL and Volga PnL combined in the Greek PnL explanation. In order to calculate vol PnL, you need to calculate the difference of values with the vol surface, with their initial parameters and with the new parameters. However, you cannot directly take the parameters from the second vol surface because they correspond to the different time and different underlying price. So you need to make the correction for that. How to do this, we're going to leave it outside of this discussion today. However, once you do this calculation, you actually can compare vol PnL to the Vega PnL and Volga PnL, both in the Black and Scholes sticky strike world and in the world where you do spot vol dynamics with the proper adjusted Greeks. After you calculate vol PnL, you can further decompose it into the vol PnL attributed to just the change of the at the money vol and the change attributed to the change of skew and curvature. The residual is going to be unexplained vol PnL that corresponds to the higher order vol surface changes. This is very useful for understanding the PnL of complex positions. One more important component of the PnL attribution is model PnL. If from time 1 to T2 you change your model assumptions, for example, you change your dividend model or how you define volatility time or settlement of sets or anything else, then you want to know which part of the PnL is attributed not to any changes in the market parameters, but in your modeling assumptions. And that's one more piece that's available in vol dynamics. Why having unexplained PnL in your PnL attribution framework is very important. I keep saying this, but some people ask me after the first video why I insist on this being so important. Because in some cases, people do scenario PnL attribution in such a way that they chain all the parameter changes. For example, they change the spot, then change the time, then change dividends, and change the rates, and attribute PnL to a particular factor at every step, and in the end, they don't have unexplained. And sometimes they permutate the changes. For example, first change spot, then change time, and do the opposite. Change time, then change spot, and take the average for calculation of the PnL for the corresponding factor. But I don't like this approach at all because it's missing the unexplained piece. So you don't know exactly when you do this, you miss this important piece, how well your factors actually do explain your PnL. Here are two examples when this is important. First of all, if you have any error in your framework, and there could be multiple places where you can create an error in your risk and valuation framework. For example, when you calculate your delta PnL, you may do this in a Black and Scholes framework where your delta is multiplied by the change in the spot price. But when you do your time shift, when you calculate your theta PnL, you may do it in the Black framework in which the spot follows along the forward curve. By the way, in vol dynamics, you can do the PnL explanation both ways, both in Black and Scholes and in the Black framework. But if you mix the two, you're definitely going to get unexplained PnL that's going to show you that your Greeks are not consistent. That you calculate one Greek in Black 76 model and the other one in Black and Scholes model. Or if your theta calculations has an error because you have several different time conventions for volatility time versus discounting or funding time. All of them have different offsets, and volatility time can have all kind of seasonalities and events. If you are not consistently using them in theta calculation or theta PnL attribution, then you are going to get unexplained PnL. If you maybe do adjusted contracts and you need to do all kind of adjustments to the Greeks that you do and you made an error, you will never see this if your PnL attribution framework doesn't have the unexplained piece. It's a great debugging tool. I highly recommend it to anyone who implements any kind of prices. The second reason is that your portfolio risk may have exposure to something that is not accounted in your risk framework. There might be all kind of examples how this can happen. In the previous video, I mentioned if your PnL attribution is missing vanilla PnL and you have some skew risk, you're not going to see that. You may be hedging something without understanding your PnL is coming from somewhere else. But also, if your PnL attribution is missing, I don't know, dividend PnL or model PnL or early exercise PnL, it's one of the other things that we calculate. If you don't do optimal early exercise, that also will show as unexplained PnL in your framework.